Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings here on Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I really appreciate you being with me. Such a joy to be with you every week. I appreciate the great comments that many of you are sending. I appreciate the YouTube visitors and viewers. And, been getting a lot of great comments, on the videos. And also getting a lot of, shall we say, resistance. But that's okay. Like I said, as long as objectors are respectful and courteous and want to engage in proper dialogue, gentlemanly or gentle ladies, as the case might be, then that's perfectly acceptable. I don't tolerate, I have to say just this morning, there was an atheist posted a bunch of comments on my YouTube video, and they were nasty, they were caustic, and I do not very often delete comments or block posters. It just kind of goes against the grain. But this individual made no effort whatsoever to make any kind of an argument. Everything that they said was false. Everything that they said was just ugly. Just absolutely ugly. So I sat and pondered, and a lot of times when that has happened on my YouTube channel, I have posted in response, and I've said something like this. I have said, okay, here's the deal. If you want to engage in honorable dialogue, sincere argumentation, then please make an argument. But if all you're going to do is come on my YouTube blog and post insults, nasty language, caustic language, guess what? I will not tolerate it. You will not be allowed to post. So, if you've got an argument, then make it. And I must say, there has been one atheist that has posted some claims, and he's been gentlemanly, he's been courteous, and so I've allowed him to continue to post because it allows me to answer the skeptical claims and to show that they are invalid. Another atheist has posted just very recently, making claims, for instance, that none of the gospel writers were eyewitnesses because Matthew borrowed from Mark proves that neither one of them were eyewitnesses. And you talk about a fallacious argument. I mean, as I sometimes like to say, that doesn't even make good nonsense. I mean, it just makes no sense at all. So anyway, this individual made about 3 of that kind of claims, and so I responded, pointing out the logical fallacy of this individual's arguments. And I told him, if you want to engage in dialogue, that's cool. I'll be happy to answer your arguments. I'll be happy to answer your claims. But don't make silly claims. I didn't use that word. But don't make arguments that are so fallacious as you just have and expect anybody on here to accept them. It just won't work. So anyway, I do appreciate so many people watching Now TV, and I appreciate your comments. I invite you to participate. And we have been involved, and we are involved, in a study of the challenge of Christ. That challenge of Christ is found in John chapter 10, verse 37, where Jesus, standing in front of a hostile crowd, said, "If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me." As I pointed out last week, none of the other world religions issue such a challenge. None of the other world religions even gladly accept historical investigation. Some of them get hostile when you dare to question anything that they say is the truth. So, Jesus' own words stand head and shoulders above any other religion. He invites us to investigate his claims. He invites us to look at the evidence to support who he is, what he said, and did he keep his word. Now, I'm currently involved in some YouTube discussions with individuals who believe that Jesus failed, or Jesus lied, Jesus was deluded. These skeptical individuals, and look, one of the tragedies is some of these people claim to be Christians. Folks, how can anyone who claims to be a Christian, who claims to love Jesus, who claims to believe in Jesus, stand up and overtly say, as some quote, unquote, Christians recently did on my YouTube channel, when I posed the question, did Jesus come back in the lifetime of the Thessalonians and give them relief from that ongoing persecution that they were experiencing right then and right there? And this one individual claims to be a Christian, said, no, he did not. And I have had, listen, informal public debate. I have had Christian opponents tell me point blank, Jesus did not come back in the lifetime of the Thessalonians and give them relief from their persecution. And you've just absolutely got to catch the power of this. Steve Gregg, and I have mentioned that Steve, who is a friend of mine, Steve recently wrote a book, Why Not Full Preterism? And he recounts the fact that in 2003, he and I had a 2-day formal debate in Denver, Colorado. Now, you can get that debate, either download or you can get the actual DVDs by going to my website, donkpreston.com or BibleProphecy.com, and ordering. And you'll be glad you did, by the way. So anyway, in that debate, I made the argument for 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. Point number 1, Thessalonians, those living, breathing Thessalonians of 2,000 years ago were being persecuted. Point number 2, they were being persecuted by the Jews. Point number 3, Paul said that Christ would give the Thessalonians relief, from the Greek word anesis, from that then ongoing persecution, and would give to their persecutors, as he expressed it, and will give to you who are being troubled, relief, and to those who are troubling you, tribulation, thlipsis, persecution. So in other words, Paul was saying, the tables are going to be turned on your persecutors. They are going to become the persecuted. And in that debate, I asked Steve if Christ came and gave them relief. And he said no. And in his book, written in 2022, he was kind enough to send me a personal copy, signed and autographed, and with a very nice thank you note in it. He argues extensively. Jesus did not come and give the Thessalonians relief. And yet Paul is absolutely unequivocal. He is emphatic. The language is undeniable. The Lord will give to you who are being, not to those who will be one day, not to those who will be persecuted. He will give to those who are persecuting you. Tribulation. Now, folks, who was it persecuting the Thessalonians? Wasn't the Romans. Wasn't the Roman Catholic Church. It was the Jews. Acts chapter 17 proves it. So anyway, I've taken this time to show how important the challenge of Christ is. And on a future program, I will spend time to break down 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, basically word by word, term by term, phrase by phrase, to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the challenge of Christ demands that Christ came in the lifetime of the Thessalonians 2,000 years ago, or Paul lied, or Paul's prediction failed, and inspiration just goes out the window. All of this demands, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely demands that we take the language of time. When God said something was at hand, coming quickly, coming shortly, etc., he meant it. And he knew what he was saying. I've been demonstrating that by going to the book of Revelation and showing, and boy, I'm not going to take very long to do this, ladies and gentlemen, but it's so critically important, okay? The Father told Jesus to tell John, these things must shortly come to pass. The term that is translated as shortly is intakai. I have demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that intakai does not mean rapidly as opposed to imminently, as some try to argue. And I have demonstrated that John was told the time is drawn near. Ho Chiron has drawn near. Ingeken, the perfect tense of ingus, meaning that what was once not near had now, for John, had now come. And I pointed out that Jesus gave a warning. Luke chapter 21 and verse 8. Many will come into my name saying, I am he, and the time has drawn near. Do not believe them. Jesus warned against making premature declarations of the end. I have taken at least 3 or 4 videos now to drive home the point that Jesus gave that warning about making premature declarations of the nearness of the end, but he gave signs whereby he said, when you see these things, the signs that he gave, come to pass, then know that that is the end, Christ's parousia, the end of the age, etc., then know that it is nigh even at the door. I have pointed out, James, who knew about that warning, said, the coming of the Lord, the parousia, has drawn near. I have asked you to consider, was James one of the very false prophets that Jesus warned about? We got to face this. I have shown you that Peter, who was there on the mountain and heard Jesus warn against making premature declarations of the end, said, the end of all things has drawn near. And he said, the time, the appointed time for the judgment has come. Did Peter become one of the very false prophets that Jesus warned them about? And I've shown you that in Revelation chapter 1, verse 3, God said, blessed is he who keeps the words of this book, doesn't add to them, because the time, the kairos, has drawn near. Here is John using the exact terminology that Jesus used in Luke chapter 21 and verse 8 to warn against making premature declarations of the end. He said the false prophets will say, the kairos has drawn near, ingus, ingeken, the perfect tense form. Here is John, who heard Jesus make those warnings and give that command, do not believe premature declarations of the nearness of the end. And John used the exact, almost precisely exact, same words in the same tenses that Jesus said, here's what the false prophets are going to say. Do not believe it. And which means, if, oh, pardon me, which means if Jesus was saying, do not believe them, then he was also likewise saying, do not say that. I mean, that's real clear. So, once again, John uses the exact terminology that Jesus said the false prophets would use when the false prophets made premature declarations of the nearness of the end. So once again, my challenge to you, my question to you is, did John make premature declarations of the nearness of the end? Now, if he didn't, and he didn't, then that means that John had seen the signs of the nearness of the end, and seeing those signs, John knew that it was near, even at the door. And what did Jesus say in Revelation chapter 3? Behold, I stand at the door and knock. John knew what Peter said. The end of all things has drawn near. Now then, I want to shift our focus from Luke chapter 21 and 8 and its application in all those passages that I've adduced and shared with you. And I want us to focus on the comment there in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 3. Blessed is he who reads and understands and keeps the sayings of this book. The time has drawn near. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, my premise is this. The challenge of Christ is, if Jesus did not do what the Father gave him to do, which would include his coming, the judgment, the resurrection, then we're not to believe in him. And this just brings home the point. And I don't want you to misunderstand me here. Jesus was saying, in effect, true, fully matured faith, fully verified faith, that may be the very best way to express it, fully verified faith, would only be available when and after Jesus had kept all of the words, all of the tasks that the Father had given him. Now, at this point, somebody says, are you saying we can't believe in Jesus unless he has come, unless the judgment took place, unless the resurrection took place? I didn't say that. That's an overreaction. That's jumping to conclusions. But here is what I am saying. Let me ask you, can we have a fully developed, fully confirmed faith if Jesus was not raised from the dead? Would you accept that premise? I mean, after all, Paul said, if Christ is not risen, our faith is in vain. You are yet in your sins, and we are of all men most miserable. Hello? So it is absolutely critically important, is it not? It's fundamental to our faith to be able to look back on the fulfillment of Jesus doing what the Father had given him to do, and that was to be raised from the dead. So let me ask you a question. Why why is it not equally important to have a fully confirmed faith for us to be able to look back on the coming of Christ, the judgment, the resurrection as accomplished realities, and to be able to say, He kept His word? There is the proof. Do you know, somewhere around 1850, a scholar by the name of Halford wrote a little book, and I've been trying to get a hold of someone who owns copyright. I've been trying to get a hold of someone who has any kind of knowledge about the publishing of the book, because it's been out of print for years and years and years. Okay, it may be in the public domain now, but it was entitled The Destruction of Jerusalem, Irrefutable Proof of the Divinity of Jesus Christ, something like that. You know what the author is doing? The author, although he does not take note of the challenge of Christ, interestingly enough, the author says, and he was writing in the 19th century, takes note of the fact that Christianity at one time, all the way up to the 4th century, used the destruction of Jerusalem as a polemic argument against the pagans and against the Jews, saying, Jesus said, at a time when Jerusalem was at peace, Jesus said Jerusalem was going to be destroyed, the temple was going to be leveled. Only a true prophet could do that. It came to pass in AD 70. The city lies desolate and waste even to this day, they said. And it was true when they said that. Therefore, Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. The Bible is the inspired word of God. Well, along comes Julian the Apostate in the 4th century, a man who was raised as a Christian but apostatized, went back into paganism. And Julian the Apostate got so sick and tired of the Christians using the fall of Jerusalem as proof of the deity of Christ that he said, and remember, he's the emperor. He's the emperor of Rome. Julian the Apostate set out to rebuild the temple. Now, I got to tell you, some of the stories about what happened at the time are really phantasmagoric and are not to be believed. But the point of fact is, there were providentially a whole raft of things that happened at that time that prevented, including civil wars breaking out, that prevented him from rebuilding the temple and the city of Jerusalem. Now, here's my point. Early Christians recognized that the fulfillment of Jesus' words proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's the Son of God. Why isn't the modern church utilizing that argument? I mean, after all, it's part of the challenge of Christ, isn't it? Jesus told his apostles, do you not see all of these things? The hour is coming in which not one stone shall be left standing on top of another. Okay. Here's the challenge of Christ. Jesus said, all of these things, or this generation will not pass until all of these things come to pass. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 34. Okay. Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem in his generation. Challenge of Christ. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. Was Jerusalem destroyed as Jesus said it was going to be? Well, yes. Absolutely. Positively. Unequivocally. Proving Jesus is at the very, very least a prophet of God. He passed the challenge. He passed his own challenge. Now, you see, ladies and gentlemen, once we see that his prediction of the fall of Jerusalem was inseparably connected to his prediction of his coming on the clouds of heaven with his angels to reward every man according to his works before that generation all died out. Once we see that connection, then we can know Jesus kept his word. Now, Jesus said, don't believe me unless I do. In other words, unless you can look and see and know that I have kept my words, don't believe me. That means, ladies and gentlemen, that we must be able to look back on his coming, the judgment, and the resurrection as accomplished realities to have a fully confirmed. Now, again, can we know, can we believe in him because he raised from the dead? Absolutely, unequivocally. Can we know, can we believe in him because of the fall of Jerusalem? Absolutely, unequivocally. That's what the early church believed. Then why is it not necessary, since we have to be able to look back on his resurrection as an accomplished reality, and since we have to be able to look back on the fall of Jerusalem as an accomplished reality to have a fully confirmed faith, why is it not true that we should also not be allowed to look back on his coming, the judgment and the resurrection, to know and to have a fully confirmed faith? And you know, I'm out of faith, I'm out of time, so I'll see you next week.